The next morning came too early for Mr. Blackstone. He had barely slept, tossing and turning in his king-size bed while Elena's music echoed in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her fingers dancing across the piano keys, transforming his expensive instrument into something magical. But more than the music, he couldn't stop thinking about the look on her face when she had finished playing, the mixture of joy and sadness that spoke of dreams lost and found again, even if just for a few minutes. He tried to focus on his usual morning routine. Coffee, news, checking stock prices on his phone. But none of it felt important anymore. The numbers on his screen seemed meaningless compared to what he had witnessed the night before. Elena had created something beautiful and real in a way that all his wealth and business success never could. Mr. Blackstone had built his fortune in technology, creating apps and software that made people's lives more efficient. He was good at solving problems, at finding practical solutions to complex challenges. But this felt different. This wasn't about algorithms or profit margins. This was about a human being whose extraordinary talent had been stolen by a moment of bad luck. Around 10 in the morning, he found himself walking toward the kitchen, hoping to run into Elena. She was usually there by now, quietly preparing his breakfast or organizing his schedule for the day. But the kitchen was empty, everything already cleaned and organized with her usual efficiency. He found her in the guest bathroom, scrubbing the marble countertop with the same careful attention she gave to everything in his home. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and he could see the uncertainty in her eyes. After last night's revelation, neither of them quite knew how to act around the other. "Good morning, sir," Elena said quietly, returning to her cleaning. "Elena, we need to talk." She froze for a moment, then slowly put down her cleaning supplies. "If this is about last night, I understand if you want me to leave. I know it wasn't what you expected, and I'm sorry if I embarrassed you in front of your guests." Mr. Blackstone felt a stab of shame at her words. She was apologizing to him? After he had tried to humiliate her, after he had unknowingly hired one of the most talented musicians he'd ever heard, and then treated her like she was invisible. "No, Elena, you have nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who should be sorry." He ran his hand through his hair, struggling to find the right words. "What I did last night was cruel and thoughtless. I had no right to put you in that position." Elena looked surprised. In the 6 months she had worked for him, Mr. Blackstone had never apologized for anything. He was a man used to giving orders, not admitting mistakes. "It's all right, sir. You didn't know. But that's just it. I should have known. I should have seen that you were more than just—" He stopped himself before saying just the help, realizing how awful that sounded. "I should have treated you with more respect from the beginning." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Elena had never seen her employer look uncertain about anything. He was always so confident, so sure of himself and his place in the world. "Can we sit down somewhere?" Mr. Blackstone asked. "I have something I want to discuss with you." Elena nodded, following him to the breakfast nook that overlooked the city. She had cleaned this space hundreds of times, but had never actually sat at the table. It felt strange crossing this invisible line between employer and employee. Mr. Blackstone poured himself a cup of coffee and offered one to Elena, who accepted it gratefully. Her hands were slightly shaky. She still felt nervous about this whole situation. "I've been thinking about what you told us last night," he began. "About your accident, about your career ending because of the nerve damage in your hand." Elena nodded but didn't say anything. She wasn't sure where this conversation was going. "I want to help," Mr. Blackstone said simply. Elena's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Help how?" "I've been doing some research this morning. There have been incredible advances in nerve repair surgery in the past few years. New techniques, new technologies that weren't available when you had your accident." He pulled out his phone and showed her some articles he had bookmarked. "There's a specialist in Switzerland who's had remarkable success with cases similar to yours." Elena stared at the phone screen, but the words seemed to blur together. "I looked into experimental treatments before. Most of them are still in trial phases, and even if they work, the cost—" "Money isn't an issue," Mr. Blackstone interrupted. "I want to pay for whatever treatment might help restore function to your hand." Elena set down her coffee cup so hard that some spilled onto the table. "Why would you do that? It was a fair question, and Mr. Blackstone realized he didn't have a simple answer.
Because
Because what happened to you isn't fair. Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted. Because I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and this would actually mean something. Elena studied his face, trying to understand his motives. What do you want in return? The question stung, but Mr. Blackstone understood why she asked it. She had learned not to trust generosity without strings attached. Nothing, he said firmly. This isn't a business transaction. This is me trying to do something right for once. Elena was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. The doctors said the chances of significant improvement were very small. And even if the surgery worked, it could take years of rehabilitation before I could play professionally again. I might never get back to the level I was at before. But there's a chance, a small one. Maybe 20 or 30%, according to the specialists I consulted. Mr. Blackstone leaned forward. Those odds are better than what you have now. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know what it's like to lose everything that defined who you were? Music wasn't just my career, it was my identity. When I lost the ability to play professionally, I lost myself. I'm not sure I'm strong enough to hope again, only to have those hopes crushed if the surgery doesn't work. But what if it does work? Mr. Blackstone asked gently. What if you could get your life back? Elena was quiet again, and Mr. Blackstone could see her internal struggle. He realized that his offer was both a gift and a burden. The chance to hope again, but also the risk of devastating disappointment. Why are you doing this? Elena asked again. Really? I need to understand. Mr. Blackstone thought about the question seriously. Last night when you played, something changed in that room. My guests, these are people who have everything money can buy. But I saw something in their faces that I'd never seen before. Wonder, real, genuine wonder at something beautiful. He paused, searching for the right words. I realized that in all my success, all my achievements, I've never created anything that moved people the way your music did. Elena looked at him with new understanding. So this is about you feeling better about yourself? Maybe partly, Mr. Blackstone admitted. But it's also about you. About giving you the chance to create that beauty again, to share your gift with the world the way it was meant to be shared. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street below. People hurrying to work, living their ordinary lives, probably never imagining that extraordinary talent could be hidden in plain sight. If I agreed to this, she said slowly, if the surgery worked and I could play again, what then? I couldn't stay here as your housekeeper. That wouldn't make sense for either of us. Then you wouldn't, Mr. Blackstone said. You'd go back to being the musician you were meant to be. Elena turned to face him. And if the surgery doesn't work? If I go through all of this and end up exactly where I am now, except having disappointed us both, then you'll still have tried. And you'll know that someone believed your talent was worth fighting for. For the first time since the conversation began, Elena smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and scared, but it was genuine. I'll need to think about it, she said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Elena? Mr. Blackstone stood up as well. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that I respect you. Not just as someone who works for me, but as an extraordinary person who deserves better than life has given you so far. Elena nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to imagine stepping onto a concert stage again, feeling the lights on her face and her fingers flying across the keys without pain or limitation. It was a dangerous dream, but maybe it was time to be dangerous again. The final notes of the Chopin piece faded into silence, leaving the room feeling almost sacred. Elena's hands remained on the keys for a moment longer, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The transformation was complete. She had gone from being an invisible servant to the center of everyone's attention in the span of one incredible performance. Then, the applause began. It started with Dr. Williams, who began clapping slowly, his face filled with amazement. Mrs. Peterson joined in next, her diamond rings catching the light as her hands came together again and again. Soon, everyone was applauding, but this wasn't the polite golf clap you might hear at a boring business presentation. This was genuine, enthusiastic appreciation for something truly special. Incredible, shouted Tommy Richardson, jumping to his feet. That was absolutely incredible. Elena stood up from the piano bench, her legs feeling shaky. The adrenaline that had carried her through the performance was wearing off, and reality was setting in. She had just revealed her biggest secret to a room full of strangers. There was no taking it back now. Mr. Blackstone stood frozen, his face red with embarrassment and confusion. This was supposed to have been his moment to shine, his chance to entertain his guests with a little cruel humor at his maid's expense. Instead, Elena had completely stolen the show with a display of talent that none of them would ever forget. "Where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Mrs. Peterson asked, approaching Elena with genuine curiosity. Up close, she could see that Elena was younger than she had first thought, probably only in her early 30s, with kind eyes that held depths of experience. Elena hesitated. She had spent so long hiding her past, creating a simple story about being just another person who needed work. But after what had just happened, there was no point in lying anymore. I studied music for many years," Elena said quietly, her voice barely audible above the continued murmurs of amazement from the other guests. "Studied where?" Dr. Williams pressed gently. He was a smart man who recognized exceptional skill when he saw it. That level of technique doesn't come from casual lessons. Elena looked around the room at all the expectant faces. These people lived in a different world from her current reality. But maybe they would understand her old world, the one she had lost. "I went to the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I was accepted when I was 17. The room fell silent again. Everyone knew that name. The Curtis Institute was one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. Getting accepted there was like winning the lottery, except it required incredible talent instead of luck. "You went to Curtis?" Tommy Richardson's voice cracked with disbelief. "My piano teacher always talked about Curtis like it was some kind of musical heaven. She said only the most gifted musicians in the world get in there." Elena nodded. "I was the youngest pianist in my class. They gave me a full scholarship because my family couldn't afford the tuition." She paused, remembering those early days when everything seemed possible. "I thought I was going to conquer the world." "What happened after you graduated?" Mrs. Peterson asked softly. She could sense there was more to this story, and not all of it was happy. Elena's face changed, shadows crossing her features. "After Curtis, I got my master's degree at Juilliard. Then I started performing professionally. I played with the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Boston Symphony, even toured Europe for a season." Her voice carried a mixture of pride and sadness. Mr. Blackstone finally found his voice. "If you were playing with major orchestras, what are you doing?" He stopped himself, realizing how rude the question sounded. "What am I doing cleaning houses?" Elena finished the question for him. "That's what everyone wants to know, isn't it?" Dr. Williams stepped forward. "You don't have to tell us anything you don't want to. But I have to say, I've never heard anyone play like that outside of a concert hall." Elena looked at him gratefully. "It's okay. I've kept it secret for so long, maybe it's time someone knew the truth." She took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I was driving home from a performance in Boston. It was late, raining hard. I never saw the truck that ran the red light. The room became completely quiet. Everyone could sense that they were about to hear something painful. I woke up in the hospital 2 weeks later. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. But my left hand... Elena held up her hand, and for the first time, they could see the faint scars running across her fingers and wrist. The damage to the nerves was severe. They said I might never regain full feeling and control, Mrs. Peterson gasped softly. For a pianist, losing function in even one hand would be devastating. I spent months in physical therapy, trying everything the doctors suggested. Some feeling came back, but not enough. Not enough for the kind of precision required for professional performance. Elena's voice remained steady, but they could all hear the pain underneath. When you're a concert pianist, there's no room for almost good enough. Either you can play at the highest level or you can't. Tommy Richardson shook his head in disbelief. But you just played one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. Your technique was flawless. Elena smiled sadly. I can still play, but not the way I used to. What you heard tonight is probably the best I can do now, and it took everything I had. 3 years ago, I could have played that piece twice in a row without breaking a sweat. Now my hand will be stiff and sore for days. Dr. Williams, with his medical background, understood immediately. The fine motor control required for professional-level piano performance is incredibly demanding. Even small amounts of nerve damage can end a career. Exactly, Elena confirmed. And when your career ends, so does your income. Concert pianists don't have regular salaries or benefits. When I couldn't perform anymore, the money stopped immediately. I had some savings, but the medical bills were enormous. Physical therapy, specialists, experimental treatments. I tried everything. The weight of her story was settling over the room. These wealthy people who had never worried about money were beginning to understand what it meant to lose everything. The insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough, Elena continued. I sold my piano first. It was a beautiful Steinway baby grand that I had saved for years to buy. Then I sold most of my music, my performance dresses, anything valuable I owned. But it still wasn't enough. Mr. Blackstone felt sick to his stomach. He had been mocking someone who had lost everything, someone who had fallen from the heights of artistic achievement to cleaning houses just to survive. I tried teaching for a while, Elena went on, but it was too painful, watching young students work toward dreams that I could no longer pursue myself. Every lesson was a reminder of what I had lost. So I stopped. I took whatever work I could find that didn't involve music. How did you end up here? Mrs. Peterson asked gently. A friend knew someone who worked for a cleaning service. They said Mr. Blackstone needed a live-in housekeeper, and the pay was decent. I needed the job, and he needed someone reliable. It seemed like a practical arrangement. Elena looked around the luxurious room. I never expected to be anywhere near a piano again. Certainly never expected to play one. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Mr. Blackstone had hired Elena to be invisible, to maintain his lifestyle without him having to think about her. Instead, he had unknowingly brought one of the most talented musicians any of them had ever heard right into his home. Why didn't you tell him who you were? Dr. Williams asked. Elena shrugged. What would have been the point? I'm not that person anymore. That Elena Chen was a concert pianist. This Elena is just someone who needs work to pay rent and buy groceries. I thought it was better to keep my past buried. But as she looked around the room at the faces staring back at her with new respect and understanding, Elena realized that maybe her past wasn't as buried as she had thought. Maybe some things were too important to stay hidden forever. 8 months later, Elena stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The famous concert hall buzzed with energy as hundreds of people took their seats. Tonight would mark her official return to the concert stage after 3 years of silence, and she could hardly believe it was real. The surgery in Switzerland had been more successful than anyone dared hope. Dr. Hoffman, the nerve specialist, had managed to repair much of the damage using revolutionary microsurgery techniques. The rehabilitation that followed had been grueling. Months of physical therapy, endless exercises to retrain her fingers, and slowly building back the strength and precision that professional piano playing demanded. Elena flexed her left hand, still amazed at how it felt. The stiffness was mostly gone, and while she still experienced some minor numbness in her pinky finger, her technical abilities had returned beyond what she had thought possible. More importantly, the fear was gone, the constant worry that her hand would fail her at a crucial moment. 5 minutes. "Miss Chen," the stage manager whispered as he passed by. Elena nodded, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. She had performed at Carnegie Hall twice before in her previous career, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just another concert. This was proof that dreams could be resurrected, that sometimes life gave you a second chance when you least expected it. In the audience, Mr. Blackstone sat in the 3rd row, feeling almost as nervous as Elena probably was. He had insisted on modest seating, not wanting to draw attention to his role in making this evening possible. Over the past months, he had watched Elena transform from a broken woman hiding her talent to a confident artist ready to reclaim her place in the music world. The relationship between them had evolved into something neither had expected, a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect. Elena had moved out of his penthouse months ago, but they stayed in touch regularly. She updated him on her progress, and he found himself learning about music in ways he never had before. Sometimes she would call him after particularly difficult therapy sessions, and he would listen as she worked through her fears and frustrations. Dr. Williams was also in the audience tonight, along with Mrs. Peterson and several other guests from that memorable dinner party. Word had spread through their social circle about Elena's remarkable story, and many had asked to attend her comeback performance. They weren't here out of curiosity or pity, but because they had witnessed something special that night in Mr. Blackstone's living room and wanted to be part of Elena's journey back to where she belonged. The lights dimmed, and Elena walked onto the stage. The audience applauded politely, but she could sense their anticipation. Many of them knew her story, the promising young pianist whose career was cut short by tragedy, now attempting to return after experimental surgery. Some probably wondered if she could still play at the level required for a venue like Carnegie Hall. Elena sat at the Steinway grand piano, adjusting the bench and taking a moment to center herself. The instrument was magnificent, perfectly tuned and maintained, ready to translate her emotions into sound. She looked out at the audience, seeing hundreds of faces looking back at her with expectation and hope. As she placed her hands on the keys, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The accident that changed everything. The years of struggling to survive while the music inside her remained trapped. The humiliating night when Mr. Blackstone tried to mock her, not knowing he was about to discover something extraordinary. The months of surgery and rehabilitation, fighting to regain what she had lost. But mostly, she thought about the music itself, the pieces that had sustained her through the darkest times. The melodies that had never truly left her heart, even when her hands couldn't play them. Elena began with the same Chopin ballade that had revealed her secret 8 months earlier. The opening notes filled the concert hall with their familiar beauty, but tonight they carried new meaning. This wasn't the desperate performance of someone hiding their identity. This was a celebration of talent restored, of dreams that refused to die. Her technique was flawless, better than it had been before the accident. The months of careful rehabilitation had not only restored her abilities, but had given her new insight into the music. Every note came from a place of deep gratitude and hard-won wisdom. She played with the passion of someone who knew what it meant to lose everything and the joy of someone who had found their way back home. Mr. Blackstone watched in amazement as Elena commanded the stage with absolute confidence. This was the woman she was meant to be. Not his housekeeper, not someone hiding in the shadows, but an artist sharing her gift with the world. He felt a pride that was different from any business success he had ever achieved. This was about helping another human being become their best self. The Chopin piece flowed seamlessly into the rest of her program. Elena had chosen pieces that told her story, moments of darkness and despair followed by hope and triumph. Each composition was performed with technical brilliance and emotional depth that left the audience spellbound. During the intermission, the buzz in the lobby was electric. Audience members who had come not knowing what to expect were now discussing what they had just witnessed with amazement. This wasn't just a comeback performance. This was artistry at the highest level. "She's playing better than she ever did before," Mrs. Peterson whispered to her husband. "There's something deeper in her music now, something that wasn't there in her early recordings." Dr. Williams nodded in agreement. Suffering can destroy people, but sometimes it can also deepen their understanding of life. She's not just playing notes anymore, she's sharing her entire journey with us. The second half of the concert was even more powerful than the first. Elena performed pieces by Rachmaninoff and Liszt that showcased not only her restored technical abilities, but her growth as an artist. The final piece was her own arrangement of a simple folk song her grandmother had taught her years ago. The same grandmother who had given her first piano lessons on that old upright piano. As the last notes faded away, the audience erupted in the kind of standing ovation that Carnegie Hall reserves for truly extraordinary performances. People were on their feet, applauding with genuine enthusiasm and emotion. Some were crying, moved by the power of Elena's music and the knowledge of what she had overcome to be on that stage. Elena stood at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had dreamed of this moment during those dark months when she thought her musical life was over forever. But the reality was even better than her dreams, because it came with the knowledge of how precious and fragile these opportunities really were. Mr. Blackstone applauded with tears in his eyes. This wasn't about his money or his generosity. This was about Elena's talent, determination, and courage. He had simply been fortunate enough to help remove the obstacles that were preventing her from sharing her gift with the world. After the performance, Elena found Mr. Blackstone waiting backstage, among the crowd of well-wishers and music industry professionals who wanted to congratulate her and discuss future opportunities. "Thank you," she said simply when she reached him. "Not just for the surgery and the support, but for believing that I was worth saving." Mr. Blackstone shook his head. "You saved yourself, Elena. I just helped clear the path." They looked at each other with the understanding of two people whose lives had been changed by an unexpected encounter. Elena had gotten her career back, but more than that, she had learned that sometimes the most unlikely people could become the most important allies. Mr. Blackstone had found something more valuable than any business deal: the satisfaction of using his wealth to create something beautiful in the world. "What's next for you?" he asked. Elena smiled, her eyes bright with possibilities. "Everything. Recording contracts, tour opportunities, teaching positions at conservatories. But mostly I just want to keep playing. I want to make sure I never take this gift for granted again." As they walked out of Carnegie Hall together, both of them knew that this was really just the beginning. Elena's story would inspire other musicians facing their own challenges. Mr. Blackstone would continue finding ways to use his resources to support artists and creators. And somewhere, another person with hidden talent would get the chance they needed to let their gifts shine. The night air was crisp and full of promise, and the music was just beginning. Elena's fingers touched the keys, and everything changed in an instant. The first note that came from the piano wasn't the clumsy sound everyone expected. It was pure, clear, and perfectly controlled. Then came the second note and the third, flowing together like water in a gentle stream. Within moments, the opening melody of Chopin's ballade filled the enormous living room with its haunting beauty. Mr. Blackstone's smug smile began to fade. He had been ready to laugh, ready to watch Elena stumble through a simple children's song. Instead, he found himself listening to music that was anything but simple. This wasn't Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. This was something far more complex, far more beautiful than anything he had expected. The guests who had been chatting and chuckling just moments before fell completely silent. Mrs. Peterson, the woman with the diamond earrings, stopped mid-conversation, her wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. Dr. Williams, who owned a chain of hospitals, set down his drink and leaned forward in his chair. Even young Tommy Richardson, who usually spent dinner parties checking his phone, looked up with wide eyes. Elena's hands moved across the keyboard with incredible grace. Her left hand created a rich, deep foundation, while her right hand sang out the melody with perfect expression. Every note was exactly where it should be. Every phrase shaped with the skill of someone who truly understood the music. This wasn't just playing notes on a piano. This was bringing a masterpiece to life. The Chopin piece was known for being extremely difficult. Professional pianists spent years perfecting it. The technical demands were enormous. Rapid passages, complex rhythms, and emotional depth that required not just finger skill, but deep musical understanding. Yet Elena played it as if she had been born to perform this exact piece on this exact night. Mr. Blackstone felt his face growing hot with embarrassment. Around him, his carefully selected guests were completely absorbed in the performance. These were people he had invited to impress with his wealth and status. Instead, they were being impressed by his maid, the same woman he had just tried to humiliate. As the music continued, Elena seemed to transform before their eyes. Gone was the quiet, timid woman who cleaned his house. In her place sat someone completely different, confident, powerful, and in complete control of the magnificent instrument. Her posture was perfect, her movements elegant and purposeful. She looked like she belonged at that piano more than any of them belonged in that room. The melody soared through the penthouse, reaching into corners that money could never touch. Mrs. Peterson found tears forming in her eyes, though she couldn't explain why. The music spoke to something deep inside her, something she had forgotten existed. Dr. Williams, who spent his days dealing with facts and medical procedures, felt his heart responding to the pure emotion flowing from the piano. Elena's face had changed too. The worry and fear were gone, replaced by a peaceful concentration that made her look years younger. Her eyes were closed now, and she seemed to be in her own world, a world where only the music mattered. Her fingers moved with absolute certainty, never hesitating, never searching for the right key. She knew this piece by heart, not just the notes, but the soul of it. Mr. Blackstone tried to make sense of what he was seeing. How could a maid play like this? Where had she learned such difficult music? This wasn't something you picked up casually or learned from a few basic lessons. This was the result of serious training, years of dedicated practice, and natural talent that couldn't be bought or faked. The piece moved into its more dramatic sections, and Elena's playing became even more impressive. Her hands flew across the keys in passages that would challenge any professional pianist, yet she made it look effortless, as if the music was simply flowing through her rather than being created by her. The sound filled every corner of the vast room, making the expensive artwork and furniture seem suddenly unimportant. Young Tommy Richardson pulled out his phone, not to check messages but to record what he was hearing. He had grown up around wealth and privilege, had attended the finest schools and met famous musicians at his parents' parties, but he had never heard anything quite like this. There was something raw and honest about Elena's playing that made all those polished performances seem artificial by comparison. The emotional heart of the piece arrived, and Elena's interpretation was breathtaking. Each phrase told a story, each note carried meaning. She wasn't just playing the music, she was living it, feeling it, sharing something deeply personal with everyone in the room. The contrast between her simple uniform and the sophisticated music she was creating made the performance even more powerful. Mr. Blackstone realized that his carefully planned evening of showing off had backfired completely. His guests weren't paying attention to his expensive decorations or his impressive wine collection. They weren't talking about his latest business deals or admiring his success. They were completely focused on Elena, hanging on every note she played. The technical passages that followed were mind-blowing. Elena's fingers moved with incredible speed and precision, executing runs and arpeggios that would make conservatory students weep with envy. Yet there was nothing showy about her playing. Every difficult passage served the music, contributed to the overall emotional journey of the piece. Mrs. Peterson leaned over to her husband and whispered, "Who is this woman?" Her voice was full of awe and confusion. She had attended concerts at Lincoln Center, had heard world-famous pianists perform, but this felt different. This felt personal and immediate in a way that formal concerts never did. Dr. Williams found himself thinking about his own life, his own dreams that he had set aside in pursuit of success and money. The music seemed to be asking him questions he wasn't sure he wanted to answer. When had he last felt passionate about anything the way Elena clearly felt about this music? As the piece moved toward its climax, Elena's playing became even more intense. Her whole body was involved now, swaying slightly with the rhythm, her shoulders moving with the phrases. She looked like a completely different person from the quiet maid who had been dusting furniture just minutes before. The complexity of the music was staggering. Layered melodies wove together, creating a rich tapestry of sound that seemed impossible to come from just one person and one instrument. Elena managed every voice, every line, with perfect balance and control. It was like watching a master painter create a masterpiece. Except the canvas was made of sound and the colors were emotions. Mr. Blackstone's initial embarrassment was transforming into something else, a mixture of shame and genuine amazement. He had hired Elena to clean his house, had treated her as invisible help, had just tried to mock her in front of his friends. Now he was discovering that she possessed a talent that was worth more than all his money and possessions combined. The guests were completely captivated. Some had closed their eyes to better focus on the music. Others watched Elena's hands in fascination, trying to understand how she could make such complex music look so natural. The room that had been filled with idle chatter and clinking glasses was now a concert hall, transformed by the power of Elena's performance. As the final section of the piece approached, everyone could sense that something extraordinary was coming to an end. The music had taken them on a journey, and now it was time to return to the real world. But none of them wanted this magical moment to end. They wanted to stay in this place where a simple maid had become a musical goddess, where money and status meant nothing compared to pure talent and passion. Elena's face showed complete peace and concentration as she prepared to bring this incredible performance to its conclusion. Her fingers were ready for the final passages that would either complete the magic or break the spell that had fallen over the room. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 8 as Elena quietly moved through the massive living room, her cleaning supplies carefully balanced in her arms. The penthouse apartment stretched out like a museum, filled with expensive art and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. She had been working here for 6 months now, and still couldn't get used to how big everything was. Elena had learned to move like a ghost in this place. Mr. Blackstone, the owner, didn't like to be reminded that the help existed. He wanted his home spotless, but he never wanted to see the person making it that way. That suited Elena just fine. She preferred the quiet moments when she could work in peace, thinking her own thoughts while she dusted and cleaned. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Mr. Blackstone was having one of his dinner parties. Elena could hear the laughter and conversation drifting from the dining room as wealthy guests enjoyed their expensive meal. She knew to stay out of sight during these events. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention to herself. As she carefully wiped down the mahogany side table, Elena's eyes fell on the grand piano sitting in the center of the room. It was a beautiful instrument, black and shiny, probably worth more than she would ever see in her lifetime. Every day she cleaned around it, being extra careful not to leave any fingerprints on its perfect surface. Sometimes, when no one was around, she would let her fingers hover just above the keys, imagining what it would feel like to play such a magnificent piano. Elena had grown up with music. Her grandmother had taught her to play on an old upright piano that barely stayed in tune. But that felt like a lifetime ago now. These days, she couldn't afford the luxury of music lessons or even access to a piano. Her life was about survival, about making enough money to pay rent and buy food. Dreams of music had to wait. The sound of footsteps on marble made her look up. Mr. Blackstone appeared in the doorway, his face flushed from wine and laughter. He was a tall man in his 50s, always dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than Elena made in 6 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself like someone who had never been told no in his entire life. Behind him came his dinner guests, all of them wealthy and important-looking. Elena recognized some faces from business magazines and news reports. These were people who owned companies, made decisions that affected thousands of workers, and lived in a world completely different from hers. And this, Mr. Blackstone announced with a sweep of his arm, is my pride and joy, a genuine Steinway grand piano, custom-made and imported directly from Germany. Cost me more than most people's houses. He patted the piano like it was a prized pet. One of the guests, a woman wearing diamonds that sparkled under the chandelier light, leaned forward to get a better look. It's absolutely gorgeous, Richard. Do you play? Mr. Blackstone laughed, a sound that didn't seem entirely pleasant. Me? No. I bought it because it looks impressive. Makes a statement, you know? Sometimes I have professional pianists come play for my parties. But tonight... He paused, his eyes falling on Elena, who was trying to make herself invisible by the window. A slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that made Elena's stomach tighten with worry. She had seen that look before, usually right before something unpleasant happened. Tonight, I have a different idea for entertainment, Mr. Blackstone said, his voice getting louder. Elena, come here! Elena's heart started beating faster. She set down her cleaning supplies and slowly walked toward the group, keeping her eyes down. She could feel all of them looking at her, judging her simple uniform and worn shoes. Yes, sir, she said quietly, Mr. Blackstone's smile got wider. My guests have been admiring my piano, and I thought, why not give them a little show? You must know how to play something simple, right? Maybe Happy Birthday or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? The guests chuckled, and Elena felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She could see what he was doing. This wasn't about music at all. This was about showing off, about proving to his rich friends that he had power over people like her. He wanted to watch her struggle and fail for their amusement. I don't think that's a good idea, sir, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, come now, Mr. Blackstone said, his tone becoming sharper. Don't be modest. I'm sure a maid can manage to bang out a simple tune. My guests would love to hear some authentic working-class music. The way he said it made it clear he thought working-class music was something inferior and amusing. The guests were all watching now, some looking uncomfortable but none willing to speak up. Elena realized they were all waiting to see what would happen next. Would the maid embarrass herself for their entertainment? Elena looked at the piano, its keys gleaming under the bright lights. Her hands trembled slightly as she remembered all the times her grandmother had made her practice, all the hours spent learning scales and pieces that she thought she had forgotten. She thought about her old life, the dreams she had given up, the person she used to be before everything fell apart. I really shouldn't. Sir, she tried one more time, but Mr. Blackstone wasn't taking no for an answer. I insist, he said firmly. Consider it part of your job duties tonight. Surely you can manage something simple on such a fine instrument. Think of it as expanding your skill set. Elena felt trapped. She needed this job desperately. She couldn't afford to lose it by refusing to do what her employer asked, even if that request was designed to humiliate her. The rent was due next week, and she had barely enough money for groceries as it was. Slowly, Elena walked to the piano bench and sat down. The seat felt strange under her, bringing back memories she had tried to push away. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting for the show to begin. Mr. Blackstone stood nearby with his arms crossed, clearly expecting to enjoy watching her fail. Elena's hands hovered over the keys for a moment. She could play something simple and terrible, give them exactly what they expected, and get this humiliation over with quickly. Or she took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. The smooth ivory felt familiar under her fingertips, like greeting an old friend she hadn't seen in years. For just a moment, she forgot about the watching crowd, forgot about her employer's cruel smile, forgot about everything except the music that had once been her whole world. The room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Even Mr. Blackstone leaned forward slightly, ready to enjoy the spectacle of a maid attempting to play his expensive piano. None of them could have imagined what was about to unfold. Elena closed her eyes for just a second, remembering her grandmother's voice telling her that music wasn't about the instrument you played or the audience you performed for. Music was about the heart, about sharing something beautiful with the world, no matter who was listening. When she opened her eyes, everything had changed. She was no longer just the maid being mocked by wealthy strangers. She was a musician again, sitting before a beautiful instrument, ready to let the music speak for itself.